So there's a really interesting report that's it's being reported on multiple outlets. This one that I have pulled up is actually on Politico. It's titled Tucker Carlson 2024, The GOP is Buzzing. Fox News host ratings have gone gangbusters, and many Republicans think he'd be a force in a Republican primary. Now, what's so interesting about this prospect is that we don't really talk about who the next Republican, nominee is going to be. Obviously, Trump won, and let's say he loses this time, they're going to have to find a new one in 2024. But either way, they're going to have to find a new one in 2024 because even if he wins, obviously his two terms will be up at that point. Although I don't see him winning this time around. But this is really interesting because Tucker Carlson he has like an insanely highly rated Fox News show. He might even be the most watched in cable news. I'm not sure. If he's not, he's definitely up there for sure. But I think that Tucker Carlson represents a new wave of Republicans. He is extremely Trump-like. He is faux populist, so he fakes that he's a populist in terms of economic terms. The supposed right-wing populism, which he's not really a right-wing populist at all. He's not a populist at all. But he fakes that just like Trump did. But he also has that strong element of reactionary on social issues. There was an amendment proposed by a Republican who wanted to replace Columbus Day with Juneteenth Day. And Tucker Carlson released a segment saying, no, we're not going to remove Columbus Day. We're not going to bow down to the SJWs. So he's very reactionary in that way. So he's both of those. Now, it says Republican strategists, conservative commentators, and former Trump campaign and administration officials are buzzing about Carlson as the next generation leader of Donald Trump's movement, with many believing he would be an immediate frontrunner in a Republican primary. Quote, he's a talented communicator with a massive platform. I think if he runs, he'd be formidable, said Luke Thompson, a Republican strategist who worked for Jeb Bush's super PAC in 2016. It says, in another twist, Carlson has established a friendship with Donald Trump Jr., according to a source familiar with their relationship. Trump Jr. has drawn his own share of presidential buzz. That's hilarious. That will never happen. It also goes on to say here, quote, let me put it this way. If Biden wins and Tucker decided to run, he'd be the nominee, said Sam Nunberg, a former top political aide to Trump who knows Carlson. But Nunberg said he doesn't believe Carlson will run because, quote, he's so disgusted with politicians. Now, Sam Nunberg is a bit of a clown. But it goes on to say, 16 prominent Republicans interviewed by Politico said there's an emerging consensus in the GOP that the 51-year-old Carlson would be formidable if he were to run. Some strategists aligned with other potential candidates are convinced he will enter the race and detect the outlines of a stump speech in Carlson's recent Fox monologues. Others, particularly those who know him well, are skeptical that he would leave his primetime TV gig. This is a really interesting report. I do think it's legit. Like, a lot of these ones I find to just be bogus. The person is just looking for clicks, whoever writes this. I actually do believe that there probably is some noise going around about, hey, Tucker Carlson 2024, do we want to run this? Do we want to not? Do we not want to run him? And I think that if Tucker Carlson were to run, I definitely think he would be a formidable opponent. I think he could definitely draw some attention and draw some support in the primary, especially if he gets backing from Trump and his allies and his, disciples and his family members and stuff like that. He'll certainly be formidable. I do not think that he would win, though. But it really all depends on how the Republican establishment wants to move. Because I believe in 2016 that I think that if the Republican establishment were to have basically done what they did with Bernie Sanders, the Democratic establishment did with Bernie Sanders this time around, if they had all, come together and basically came in to all save the day for Joe Biden, I think that Trump would have won if they had picked either probably not Marco Rubio, I think, but probably Ted Cruz. I think they probably could have done it. If you look at the numbers, this obviously assumes that a lot of the support that went to those candidates wouldn't go to Trump, which I do think would have been the case. I think that, there were a lot of establishment, boring Republicans that were running, and so there were a lot of those guys, your Jeb Bushes, your Ted Cruz, your Ben Carson, all of those people, are all of the same ilk, where Trump was the one who was kind of the only man out in that type of guy. And so I think he was able to win because it was such a big primary. But I think had they, came together and just surrounded around maybe Ted Cruz, they probably could have won. But the thing was, they hated Ted Cruz. The Republican establishment hated Ted Cruz because Ted Cruz was not liked by anybody. Everybody hated Ted Cruz, including the Republican Party, because he was one of the Tea Party guys holding up the government, shutting down the government. And so everybody was hating him because he was a piece of shit. So they didn't want to coalesce around him. Marco Rubio didn't really have much of a chance anyways. He was kind of a loser and still is kind of a loser. So this time around, I'm thinking the nominee will probably be, I think it could be Ted Cruz, maybe Chris Christie, it could be maybe Tom Cotton. Those are, some of those faces we've seen before. That's often who ends up winning these primaries. It's rarely sort of a new face. It happens sometimes, but not all that much in recent times. So I'm thinking probably one of those guys. But I do believe that Tucker Carlson would draw some support for sure, though. Like, I think he would definitely be an opponent who will be a serious opponent. But I don't know if the Republican Party, if Trump loses this time, I don't think the Republican Party is going to want to continue with the Trumpian mantra and the Trumpian ideology. I don't see that being something that the Republican Party says, hey, we want to continue with this faux populist while also being extremely reactionary, type of thing. I don't think that they're going to want to continue with that. They'll probably revert to their old George W. Bushes, because I think those are, people are kind of stupid. They'll vote for those kinds of guys, even Dumbo Democrats. So they might revert to that direction. But I think it really heavily depends on how this election turns out, and then the strategy that's played by the different Republican factions in the party after the election. So this will be a fascinating watch. I'm really curious to see who is going to be the nominee in 2024 for the Republican Party. But I don't think it's going to be Tucker Carlson, although I think that there's a chance. But I definitely believe if he were to enter, which I don't really think he will, he would be a force to be reckoned with for sure in the Republican Party.